Whether you agree or disagree with President Trump's upcoming mass deportation plan, I did come across a headline that caught my attention from the New York Post that stated Denver mayor threatens to deploy cops 50,000 residents in, quote, Tiananmen Square moment to stop Trump's mass deportations. So obviously, after working in law enforcement for so many years as a local police officer, I thought to myself, what's the legal aspect behind all this for police? So I reached back out to Anthony Bandiero. He is the CEO of the top legal training company for police. And here's the discussion that we had about this topic.
All right, Anthony. Well, thank you again for coming on the channel. And I had to bring you back on because I, obviously having worked as a local cop for so many years, got to thinking, what are the legal aspects to this regarding the local Denver police? So when it comes to something like this, what are the legal limitations for police officers when directed to resist the near future deportation order or operation, that kind of thing?
I can tell you that the state does have some tools at its disposal. And again, people are going to be very divided on this. I certainly have a strong opinion on this issue about whether or not this is actually good for our society. But the point is, the one thing that they cannot do is actually physically interfere with federal law enforcement. I mean, if they literally tried to do the Tiananmen Square type of deal where they're going to put the Denver patrol cars on the highway and not let in ICE and all their other supporting agencies, that ain't going to work. That's absolutely a federal crime. You can only imagine if the FBI is investigating some kind of interstate crime syndicate, and for some reason, a sheriff does not like the FBI and says, you know what, you're not coming into my town and investigating your interstate kidnapping case or your money laundering case. How would that go over, right? The answer, it wouldn't go over well at all. However, this whole idea of, if you want to broach the subject of, after we get done with this conversation, about sanctuary cities and what they can and cannot do, I think that's also interesting for the listeners.
Yeah, I'll take you up on that. We'll get into that in a little bit. I was wondering, though, when it comes to discretion of police officers, when they're faced with this kind of situation, what can they do?
I think it's a great question. So look, they took an oath to support the state constitution, the U.S. Constitution, and state laws and so forth. And the problem, though, is, okay, we can talk about that. And definitely, I'm an attorney, and there are things that are bright line for me. If I was told, if I was working in Denver and my elected mayor told me, and hey, you're going to intentionally obstruct federal law enforcement officers from doing their job, I would not do it, okay? I would need, for me to be comfortable with that, I would need a judge to tell me to do that. I want a judge. I want something official. I don't want a political hack telling me that, hey, you can actually go out there because I don't like their policies. It doesn't pass the smell test. And also, quite frankly, I wouldn't want the shoe in another foot. I don't want the feds telling me not to do my job either. For example, there are states out there, and well, many states that still criminalize marijuana. And whatever you think about that, whether it should be decriminalized or whatever, the point is that the feds, and they do right now, they have a lax policy towards federal law marijuana enforcement, but I don't want the feds telling Florida and Texas to not enforce those laws either. That's their choice. But at the same time, I will add this. When it comes to these issues, if there are going to be a lot of things standing on a road, for example, and actually like the image of Tiananmen Square, like where the protester was actually standing in front of a tank, clearly no cop should be doing that, okay? Standing in front of law enforcement. However, we're going to get into this, but there's going to be a lot of other things that are much more subtle, and those things are more nuanced and not as clearly illegal or just dumb, and the cops got to be careful there. They may have to enforce those regulations, laws, and so forth, even though they may fundamentally disagree with them. I just want to say that these are tough situations, and so I think that if you do have a political body out there that is very clearly telling a cop that you will obstruct federal law enforcement, I would not do it. I just want to make it very simple. I would not do it. I would say, look, I want a judge telling me I have the authority to do this. This should not come from a politically elected official. This is much higher than your pay grade.
Well said. And now I have to ask, you covered the individual officer. What about the police department? Will they face any kind of consequences because they got involved with like a politically disputed incident kind of thing?
Probably not. I think it's going to fall on the shoulders of the officer. I mean, it is a crime to obstruct federal law enforcement, right? And so if you have a mayor out there saying, hey, I want you to do this, I just don't know if that's quite the crime, right? And look, unless I'm missing something, I just don't see that being a charged offense. I can tell you, hey, go rob that convenience store. It's not necessarily an attempt. That's probably for me dumb to say, but maybe there's laws out there that can get me for an accessory or so forth. But the point is that I think it's more like an injunction. It's more like the federal government saying, hey, you got this mayor out there. He put it in writing. He said something that's clearly unlawful. It's going to get cops federally charged. I think what they're going to do is just get an injunction and just tell this mayor, chief, if he or she's in on it, hey, step down. You don't have the authority to do that. That's what I see happening. I don't see criminal charges, but I could see some criminal charges if some officer did not use good discretion here and physically put hands on a federal officer and like push back and say, you're not going, let's say, for example, there are illegal aliens inside a house and the feds got tipped off by it, whatever, but they have the lawful lawful authority to do it. They have a warrant or whatever it is, or they're inside a Burger King. It's an illegal worker. And the Denver officer is on the same page as the mayor and puts his hand down and says, you're not coming into this Burger King to grab that worker. You're going to probably go to jail. And it's probably going to be a federal holding facility, will probably be Denver PD. Be like in his own jail, whoever houses federal inmates. But the point is, that would be a crime. I don't think the mayor is going to get charged for anything on that.
So, Anthony, you said you wanted to talk more about the sanctuary cities and the laws and stuff like that. So feel free. Go ahead.
Well, look, I'm in the state of Washington. This is a sanctuary state, and I have very strong views on that and against it. Just my opinion is that it disfranchises people like me. It takes away my taxpayer money and maybe my votes and so forth. But at the same time, we do have to recognize that as far as the federal government goes, they cannot necessarily get involved in that political decision, right? So if a city like Denver is going to tell their police department, hey, we are not going to ask people's immigration status during booking in jail, they can do that. We are not going to proactively give immigration status to ICE. They can do that because they're different sovereigns, right? This is federalism. I mean, you got the federal government and you got the states. Even though the federal law is supreme law of the land, we know that from the Constitution, the states are still permitted to run their own show. And that's why you have 50 petri dishes of freedom here from Idaho to places like Texas and New York. So, but the one thing, so they can do some stuff. They can make it harder for the feds to do their job. But there is one issue that I was researching, just thinking about these topics. And it's like, there is a law in the book, like 3373, but I'll verify it. But the point is, there is a law that says that states must send immigration status of a person in their custody to ICE so that ICE can do their job, right? So they can handle immigration. And that is really probably, I think, the central issue. That law has already been fought in New Jersey, and we have a win and we have a loss from two different courts in New Jersey. But one court says, nah, you cannot make New Jersey give you that information. Another court says they don't see an issue with it. I don't see an issue with it, by the way. What the court was saying was that the one that was against it was saying, hey, look, you're basically, it's called commandeering. The federal government cannot commandeer a state government. They cannot say, hey, you will do this. You will do that. They can't, that's a sovereign. They can't tell people, generally speaking, what to do. A good example, by the way, is the drinking age. It's 21 in every state. But do you know it's 21 because of the federal government? Some states, it was 18, I think, including Idaho. The only reason that these states that didn't believe that 21 should be the right age for drinking since you're an adult is because the federal government was going to withhold highway funds if they didn't do it. So that's how the federal government can pressure states to do what they want. Going back to this issue, though, you're going to see this law be the main fight because if ICE can learn that an immigrant is at a detention facility, then they can get the proper paperwork to deport them. But everything else, as far as like being proactive, Denver does not have to be proactive. They don't have to reach out to the federal government.
Okay, thank you for all that. And it's going to get very interesting. Police officers, particularly in cities like this, where the mayor is threatening to, quote, use them and all this kind of stuff. Police officers have to be very efficient legally. So I cannot recommend to anyone watching this video enough. If you work in law enforcement, you have to get continuous legal training. Blue to Gold is an excellent resource. Anthony, can you talk more about Blue to Gold? How can they find more training and take advantage of more training?
I appreciate it. And just to clarify, it was 8 USC 1373. So, which is a law that's going to be central to this, I think, this issue of being proactive by the Trump administration to deport, quote unquote, millions of illegal immigrants. Now, part of it. So, Blue to Gold is the largest legal trainers in the nation by far. Nobody trains as much as we do as far as legal issues. There are a lot of great trainers out there, a lot of great companies that I work with. But as far as like their niche, we are search and seizure, right? That's our thing. Also interview interrogation law. So we teach nationally. We have dozens of instructors that travel around the nation all the time, including myself. But the one thing I'll tell your audience is that we do a lot of stuff for free. Your podcast is very informational. They don't pay a penny. And I'm not saying they shouldn't pay a penny. You want sponsors, right? But they get a lot of information from you. And so we have a weekly webinar that we do on various legal topics, and they can join for free. And so far, we've had hundreds of people join us every week, cops, and sometimes a lot of attorneys too. And that's really what I would push out there. Just if you don't know us, don't pay. There's no reason. Just once you try before you buy, go to one of our webinars, check us out. If you like our training style, if you like what we're doing out there, then you can look at our classes and say, well, let's see these guys in person, because hands down, we are the best. When it comes to search and seizure, we're the best.